LSU and Texas A&M, a really good matchup. A&M wins 38-23 over the Tigers. Joe, at this point, I put out a lot of content about this, so I haven't heard your thoughts about it yet. I'm very intrigued to hear what you thought about the game. Your thoughts of A&M's win over LSU.
First of all, to talk about the quarterback situation, because I think that this is the biggest catalyst for what Texas A&M's success this year overall has been. I think that Marcel Reed does need to be the lead guy going forward. I have been very anti two-quarterback system, but I've pointed out that there are certain exceptions in certain situations, Blake, that work. I think that Saturday's performance paints a potential situation where going forward, Texas A&M can ride the hot hand. If they open a game with somebody and it's not working, they can switch to Weigman or switch back to Marcel Reed. You can ride whichever play style is working best for you. And the reason why in this circumstance, Blake, and I think that this is going to create serious headaches if they try to do it this way, and I've mentioned this before, if you do your game plan, and LSU defenders even talked about this after the game, if you do your game plan for one quarterback and a guy who plays a completely different type of game steps into the game, it is impossible to make mid-game adjustments to prepare for it. But outside of that, this Texas A&M running game, it's phenomenal. This offensive line is paving some serious paths that are helping them run over any defense that they're going up against. And I think that defensive front for Mike Elko, he is a great defensive mind to the point where we're seeing that this team is getting better on a week-to-week basis. They're smothering, they're confusing, they're causing problems for every single quarterback that they've gone up against. This Texas A&M team, as we said in the open, Blake, they are worthy of a playoff spot. If they finish the year strong, they're going to be one of the SEC teams that get in.
3 weeks ago, I said this last night. I said it on the guy's show. I went on this postgame show last night. But 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever the Florida game was, okay, I came out and I was asked a question about who are some of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. My response was Marcel Reed, because I saw Florida. And listen, I think that there's a difference. Actually, I think that there's a different style of quarterback that's coming up than what we're now normally used to. In the reference to, Joe, you see a Caleb Williams, a guy that's mobile and can move and can really throw the ball. Jaden Daniels is another. J.J. McCarthy. Name the guys, Joe, that are coming out that are having these types of success. It's multiple dual threat guys. No longer are there days of guys just sitting back in the pocket, not being able to run. I think Marcel Reed is just an outright playmaker, Joe. And I get what you're saying about Connor Wigman. But we talked about last week in reference to him, he should have had 5 interceptions against Mississippi State. He had a very bad half against LSU. It's not as if that Connor Wigman was playing good football. It's just that nobody was entertained by A&M and Mississippi State because of how bad State is. It's not on everybody's radar and antenna during a big week. So the bottom line is that Marcel Reed probably gives you, because of the offensive play caller that you have, CC Kansas State with Avery Johnson. Joe, this is the exact same thing that happened at Kansas State last year with Will Howard, is it not? I mean,
yes. That's a very good point to bring up.
It's damn near identical of what is happening here. So even in that point, I do believe and agree that the highest upside right now, it would appear that it's Marcel Reed. To your point in reference to the game of why we bring that up. So Marcel Reed, Garrett Nusmeier has a bad turnover. Obviously, Marcel Reed comes in, first play, touchdown, bang, 31 unanswered points, or 31 unanswered points. You got an LSU defense that's reeling, but here's the thing. There are some things, Joe, when I go back and watch it today that I think LSU did help him out with. They're out of assignment. They're not sound correct. They're not fundamentally sound on some things. And I do think that helped Marcel Reed. Now the question, a lot like Avery Johnson a year ago for A&M, who, Joe, we can look at the game, and we can. Where do they go from here as an offense? They're physical at the line of scrimmage. They'll run the football down your throat. But now they have a playmaker at quarterback. Joe, they literally in the second half just out-physical LSU and outplayed them. I mean, one team made mental mistakes. The other was ready to pounce on those mental mistakes. Let's not act like this isn't a tale of two halves here. LSU dominates the first half, and then A&M dominates more in the second half to win this football game. So I look at this and say, I still think that you have two even teams in a lot of degrees, but one kind of got away from them in the other, right? Like at the end, Elko started pounding that ass at the end. Joe, A&M is a tough, physical, well-coached football team that's got dudes. They got playmakers and dudes all over the place. The question now becomes, if you have a team like South Carolina that you'll see next week that can stop the run at will better. I mean, South Carolina's front seven is nothing to sneeze about, okay, at all. They're one of the best. Joe, now comes the part if Marcel Reed gets back into an Arkansas situation where he's got to throw the football around a little bit, how do they play there? Now, they're winning.
But that brings up the conversation point and why is it Wigman? I keep getting corrected by folks.
They want you to say Wigman.
Okay, Wigman. That kind of brings up what I brought up with Wigman, where if that does happen, first half, Marcel Reed, they're doing a really good job of playing the run because they actually have the bodies to do so. You flip the switch, you bring Wigman in for a couple of series, and you start to see if you can take some of those shots if the game is close, and then you let him finish the football game. That's what I'm trying to say here, and I'm not saying that like one guy can't be better than the other. They have one of the few times where this system can work. And we've seen them do it. We saw them do it against Mizzou. We saw them do it against Florida. We're bringing up examples here where both guys have played really good. One guy or the other. It doesn't have to be.
I'm going to pause here with you. I understand and agree with what you're saying. But you got to let Marcel Reed cook here for a minute.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Start him next game. And then if they're doing a really good job of playing against him, bring in Wigman and start taking some shots.
I guess. In reference to the game, let's talk about that. So LSU dominates the first half. They're unable to execute on certain things. The field goal, special teams, yet another blunder when we talk about special teams. Missed 2 field goals. Joe, ironically, they were the one dominating physically, okay, in the first half defensively. They get a turnover. They get a turnover on downs. They're really making some things happen here. Wigman is 6 of 18 through a half in a series. So A&M comes back, and we talked about Marcel Reed. Look, they did nothing special to me, A&M. When you go back and watch it, it's zone read principles, Joe. It's an inverted veer with a guard pull. I mean, that it is what it is. I mean, that's what they ran, and LSU wasn't prepared for it, nor did they stop it. So now, for me at least, you just got to look at A&M and say, listen, now everybody knows what you can do and what you're capable of. So now teams are going to game plan for it. The question now becomes, too, and talking about the game, Joe, it wasn't just one side of the football. I mean, they forced Garrett Nusmeier into 3 interceptions. Now, they got beat on a lot of stuff, but they held him to those interceptions. They got to him, and just mentally. So I look at this and say, too, when I look at the game, one team just overwhelmed the other when it mattered the most.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts. There's 2 things here with LSU that stand out to me. One, I think that Joe Sloan, it's kind of been proven here that he should not be the play caller. I really don't think that he should. I think that how quickly they abandoned running the football. When you have a really good offensive line, if you can't figure out how to get this run game going with a great running back in Caden Durham and all of these NFL offensive linemen, that is an indictment on your decision-making as a play caller. Nusmeier's performance, albeit I have been one of the few people that don't think that he is as good as everyone has propped him up to be. He is a box score champion, the Daniel Jones-ish of the SEC, where he'll put up some really good stats and he's got some pretty good traits, but the decision-making's not there. That got accentuated because they threw the ball as much as they did. You weren't trailing early. You were up. You have this opportunity in this position
to lean on them.
To lean on the run game and open up the run game and be creative. I don't get it with Sloan why they cannot figure out how to get things going. This is not a situation like other teams that we've discussed. Like Oklahoma is an example that we talked about where I've said they need to try to run the football, and then we've come to the conclusion that they can't because they don't have the offensive line to do it.
Well, then they line up against Ole Miss this week and run the football, and they're up at half. So, look, you're 100% spot on, but continue. I'm sorry.
The other point that I have, and I have to be a dick, man. I have to. This comes to fruition of what I have talked about with Brian Kelly Blake.
Here it comes.
He is the king of winning football games against the teams that he's supposed to beat. Arkansas, beating Ole Miss at home. But when it comes to any situation, and as a Notre Dame fan, and watching this so often, and knowing what he does when it comes to these spots where the games that they're not expected to win or are the real, truly difficult situations for them to step into, he falters. He falters. USC got tough, they faltered. Texas A&M got tough, he faltered. I don't know what the full scope of this is and what this means for the future of LSU. But I find it very troubling that a lot of those same issues in big games that he had when he was at Notre Dame continue to come up now at LSU. And we get more and more proof of it.
I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to hold off on what you said about that because I want to come in here in 2 weeks just in case and be like, told you so, bitch.
Well, wait. But actually, I would argue, though, that that's a game that they should win. They're at home against a Bama team with a first-year head coach that's been inconsistent. That's one of those.
They're not going to be favored. But
yes,
they're not.
They will be.
No, they will not be.
You and I both know that they should be, though.
Well, I bet.
The books have not been good this year, by the way. The sports books have not been good with a lot of their lines. They don't know who's supposed to be favored or not.
Yeah, transfer portal is really getting to them, too. So this has been a wacky year. If you're making by the way, I bet all of our picks this week straight up and won. I lost one game. You ready? The one that I lost to you by. So now you've put it down to a score. Here's the thing for me with LSU. There's a lot of content that I have out there. Here's what I'm going to say. You cannot turn the football over. Joe, it's the bottom line. Why I've had to fight for that on and covering LSU. The reason I don't blows my mind. Okay. But Joe, momentum is a massive thing. And Garrett Nusmeier has had 7 interceptions in the last month. Joe, there could have been a situation where he should have more than that. He's too turnover prone. I would rather the Connor Wigman approach in reference to, hey, man, I would rather a quarterback not take the shot than take the shot and make a boneheaded decision and get picked. Because when you don't turn the football over, you give at least your defense a chance.
Well, I feel like the biggest problem, not to cut you off, but I feel like his biggest problem is that he doesn't handle pressure well. Like he doesn't, the throws that he had in this game, the last 2 that he had where he rolls out and he kind of just chucks it cross body off kilter into a 50-50 ball situation where his guy doesn't even have the best angle. And then the second one, the pocket's collapsing and then he gets picked off by, it was a linebacker or a DB that just baited him into dumping it off.
He check down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah. I mean, you got to start there. Like, I don't think LSU defensively, look, they got shell-shocked by Marcel Reed. Great players make great plays. You got shell-shocked. It was what it was, okay? But it doesn't mean that you got to turn the football over the way that you did and do some things that you were doing. Like, if you're going to lose, make Marcel Reed go 85 yards on you and play field position. See what happens. But you don't have that ability when you turn the ball over. Joe, they had 2 turnovers on downs. They had 4 total turnovers with 3 interceptions, including that, and a missed field goal that led to a fumble and a turnover on downs. They missed 2 field goals. It is the equivalent of you having 6 turnovers. It is that equivalent. And here's the thing. If you're LSU, people are going to kill me for saying this. And yet until the end of that game, when they got the last touchdown, Joe, you were within 5 points of that game. 3 minutes left to go. It's a 5-point game. And then you throw a pick. So the turnover-worthy plays or the turnover-worthy situations, it's not over for you. I mean, you got a doable, that's what she said, schedule, okay, down the stretch. What are you going to do with it? And you know what, Joe? Here's what I'll say to your Brian Kelly thought and analogy. You're right. Go prove it. Go prove it. Go prove it. That's all I'd say on that. So it is what it is on that. A&M's a contender, man. They're a scary team. They're rolling. Mike Elko has really made them a physical football team, man.
Before we close out this segment and we move on to the next one, for all of the buffoons who said that Mike Elko should not have been the head coach, learn ball. Please, learn ball. There were a lot of people that didn't like this Elko hire. We were two of the few that came on here and said Elko is not only going to be a good hire, it's going to be a great hire. We talked about how it raised the floor.
Dude, we got shit
for that. We got shit for that.
We got massive shit for praising the Elko hire.
All I'm just trying to say here and reiterate is that he is just such a good pure ball coach. He's one of those guys that just fit the tough, hard-nosed, going to push his guys and show up and set the tone. And that's what's happening year one.
That's going to be a scary place if he keeps producing like this now. They ain't a place to play around with. They're not. So you can think, hey, they're goofy and weird and do weird shit, and their cheerleaders eat grass off a field. That shit doesn't matter when that ball's kicked off. That shit doesn't matter. So it's good for fans. It has nothing goes into the game with it. By the way, Mike Elko, I heard your post-game press conference. Jimbo.